apparently, before the Colts acquired Carson Wentz, they reached out to the Raiders about Derek Carr and were rebuffed. Mm-hmm. Now, there's two aspects here. Does that mean that they, I guess, half-heartedly said, all right, I guess if we can't, I guess we'll get Carson Wentz? That's the one. I'll let you answer both. That's one aspect. The other aspect is, do we now interpret that as a steel connection between the Raiders, commitment-wise, between the Raiders to Derek Carr?
Well, I don't know if it's either or. I think Derek Carr knows the business of this game. He's seen it happen, very frequently in front of him with his teammates and, heck, his coaching staff as well. So I think he understands that, if it's up to me to get better, continually get better. The challenge is that John Gruden is the type of coach, just the type of person who will bid a bigger, better deal you. If he feels that there's an opportunity to get someone, even if it's, just marginally better, that's going to give you a better chance, he'll do that. Mm-hmm. Now, it's interesting because I did that last game, as we all know, as we talked about on the show multiple times with the Raiders and the Broncos, BT, and in talking to Derek Carr, he was like, yeah, I just feel like I'm starting to, grow. Like, I'm just at the point now where I feel confident to continue to progress as a quarterback. And a lot of that is because it's his third season with Gruden. Mm-hmm. Consistency at his offensive coordinator, which he didn't have earlier part in his career. And there's a weapon or weapons that are dynamic as heck on that team, and including obviously Darren Waller, who's the most effective one of that group. He's the leading wide receiver, and that went for over 1,000 yards instead of Raiders' record.
Leading receiving tight end, you mean?
I mean tight end. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I got you.
Just receiving person. Yep. He's great, and so when you have that type of player around you, mm-hmm. I don't want to say it's easy to be really good, but it makes it a lot easier to start progressing and actually maybe being the right guy to hold that franchise tag, even though I don't know what that means anymore in football. At this point, it means nothing. It means very little because what was the stat yesterday? If you missed yesterday's show, from 2009 through 2016, not a single quarterback drafted in round one remained with the team that took them. 22 instances, 0 for 22. Just crazy. 0 for 22. I mean, you're on the bench. You're batting ninth, and then you're on the bench, and then you're in Double-A if you go 0 for 22 too many times. That's not good. And that trend's only going to continue because, as I said, I won't be repetitive, but got Josh Rosen. This doesn't count. This is just the 2016, 09 through 16 window that I referenced. But Sam Darnold might move on. Josh Rosen's already moved on. Tua might move on. Maybe for Miami. So we shall see. There's a lot of moving parts. Franchise quarterback, your guess is as good as mine. But apparently it wasn't just the Colts. Let's see. Jim Aiello had this tweet, and he follows the Raiders, verified, obviously a credentialed media member. He wrote, league sources say Colts were among the teams that checked in on the Raiders. Among the teams that checked in on the Raiders, starting quarterback Derek Carr received a pretty firm not available. Mm-hmm. The only thing that I worry about with Derek Carr is that now it's one thing to do well when it's optimal circumstances around you. You have pass protection. They've got a good offensive line. They've devoted as much free agent money to the offensive line as anybody. It's like 60. I might have the numbers off, but I think it was $65 million. They spent inordinate amount of resources on the front five, which is not a bad thing to do, but it illuminates they got a good old line. Jacobs, stud. Waller, stud. Ruggs needs to learn some routes, but he burns, so he's going to. Hunter Renfrow is really good, too. Renfrow is a terrific player, terrific stick finder. Hunter Renfrow could play at this level. We weren't sure coming from Clemson. He could play. So as things erode, whether it's through just the physical, the atrocious nature of football, contractually, is Derek Carr an elevator? That's what I have my real doubts about, strong doubts. But I don't know. And the question is, you don't know, right? But what do you surmise? I surmise no. I'm uncertain, but I would actually lean towards yes. Wow. Because I do see him as a leader. And he's got a confidence about him when you talk to him, and I think his locker room feels that as well. And let's not. I mean, we give Darren Waller a lot of credit for being one of the best tight ends in football. I think he was third in receiving touchdowns this year, but obviously he was right up there in yards and over 1,000. Had over 100 catches. Like he's become an elite player. He didn't do that all by himself. Like a lot of that was because of Derek Carr's trust in him and his ability to move him around in that scheme and use him in many different ways. And Derek takes advantage of that. So you got to give Derek some credit for elevating the career of Darren Waller, because before he was there,
he was with the Ravens.
Like Darren Waller was like an afterthought.
He was basically out of football.
He was exactly right. Now, part of that was, off the field stuff, which we talked about a lot.
With him, we talked about it. We had him on a month ago.
That's exactly right.
He was great.
And so you got to give Derek Carr credit. Also, Hunter Renfrow, who we just mentioned before, right? Like he's known as the savior for Clemson in the national championship game, right? But at the end of the day, Hunter Renfrow is not like. He's not like an all-pro type wide receiver, but Derek Carr has made him into one of the more reliable, third down catchers and, puts him in positions to be successful in football. Like they love what they have on offense. The issue with the Raiders is that their defense has been banged up, inconsistent, and doesn't have someone who's impactful. And so like we look at why the Raiders win and why they lose, and everybody wants to point at the quarterback. But the issue with the Raiders is not the quarterback. The issue with the Raiders is defensively. They just can't stop anybody.
Yeah, it's been a problem for a couple of years now. They can score. They can't stop you.
That's right.
So, I mean, it is interesting. In an era where smoke usually represents fire and fire usually leads to change, there's been a lot of smoke around Derek Carr for years now, really since the day that John Gruden took over.
That's right.
I'm like, guys, got to find his quarterback. Derek Carr is probably not it.
No, I think he is.
That's kind of where I was going. We're at this point, this fork in the road where it's like, okay, if you're going to move on from Derek Carr, I almost feel like we're past that point.
Yeah, I agree. To the point where
from the Raiders' point of view.
Well, it's also and what emphasizes that point is that there are teams like the Colts who are actually looking at him. You know what I mean? And trying to get him. I think the other interesting side of this with the Raiders, and I think John even acknowledged this at the end of his year, that he knew that teams were going to come after Derek Carr and come after Marcus Mariota. We're still waiting to see what happens with Mariota.
I think somebody's going to pluck him away.
Yeah, because he's got a year left on his deal, so it's not they're not necessarily tied to him. But I think they saw his value in that game where Derek Carr strained his groin early in the game. Remember?
Yep.
And Mariota.
It was a night game. It was a Thursday night game, was it?
Yeah, Mariota.
He played well.
He balled. He ran.
He did.
He had 88 yards rushing and a touchdown. And I mean, he's a good.
And he hadn't played in a year and a half.
That's right.
Remember that?
Because he missed half of, or whatever, however many games it was the previous season when Ryan Tannehill took over for him.
Exactly.
So, I mean, he played well in that game, threw a touchdown.
He did.
Didn't
he dive? Didn't he dive for a first down? Like he was throwing his body. I remember talking about that the next day. We were both very impressed with Mariota that night.
I agreed. And he looked confident in what he was doing. So, he may be the one that gets plucked off of that Raiders team. But I think Derek Carr, to your point that we just made, he's there for the long haul with the Raiders.